Thank you, Billy. And so thrilled to be here. I'm going to introduce the panel in a moment, but I want to set this up in terms of the conversation and what we're about today very briefly, because mostly I want to hear from these brilliant people. We have talked a little bit about ESG and corporate sustainability and reporting, and there's an element at the macro level of understanding that sustainability and resilience are connected, and that there's a need to start assessing at a enterprise scale or organizational scale natural hazard and climate related risks. So there's a higher level element both in terms of disclosure as well as some voluntary efforts. And I think highly articulated really well why we need to do that, because there's some of the systems that would support us in doing it that are eroding. And then at the more grassroots level, we have architects who now through the AIA are understanding a evolving standard of care that requires assessing and informing their clients about climate and natural hazard risks for individual buildings and projects that they're working on, as well as industries and standards like the ASTM property resilience assessment that are coming into due diligence processes to look at individual assets. So you've got individual facilities and assets, and you've got an overarching need to look enterprise and industry wide, and those are coming together in a need for a more holistic approach to thinking about how do we address natural hazard and climate risks along with other sustainability concerns in the built environment. And so that's why we have this amazing panel here today to discuss all aspects of that, from design through operations of buildings. So with that, I want to introduce our wonderful panel. First, to my right, Emma Hughes is a Senior Director of Climate Risk Solutions practice at Retech Advisors. In this role, she works closely with clients to build innovative, tailored programs that accelerate sustainability performance, enhance resilience, and mitigate climate risk in alignment with core business and investment strategies. I'm really honored. Yeah, I'm really honored that I get to serve alongside Emma on the USGBC's Resilience Working Group. So we work together there. Emma previously spent 8 years at the U.S. Green Building Council developing green building rating systems and the net zero or LEED zero certification program. So a lot of involvement both on the USGBC and now helping the real estate industry with these issues. Next to her is Amanda Barton, AIA, who's Vice President at HKS Incorporated and specializing in coastal hospitality design, guiding projects from master planning through documentation, a former AI Miami president and current South Florida NOMA vice president. She champions sustainable design and resilience through advocacy and education. She was the co-author of the AI Resilience Design Toolkit, which is something I've been promoting and excited about. So I'm really glad to be able to meet one of the two, and I know the other one as well, the primary authors of that tool. Fantastic tool if you don't know it. So co-authored the AI Resilience Design Toolkit and earned the recognition of Engineering News Record's top young professionals and the AIA National's Young Architect Award. So we have an award winner. She continues to amplify resilience and equity through leadership, mentorship, and community engagement. Next, we have Kendall Turner, who is a sustainable design specialist at HOK based in Tampa. She has nearly 10 years of experience working in corporate, commercial, multifamily, residential, federal, healthcare, and higher education market disciplines. She also facilitates HOK's corporate commitments, including the AIA 2030 and AI Materials Pledge. Kendall previously served with me also on the AIA, or so the lead resilience working group. So we've had a chance to work together there. And finally, my friend and collaborator, Albert Slapp, down at the end. He's the president of RiskFootprint, a SaaS natural hazard, extreme weather, and flood risk assessment tech company located just up the road in Boca. RiskFootprint also has a consulting division that works with my company and others to offer help to clients that make better and more informed decisions into buying and investing in properties, loan underwriting, credit terms, and the return on investment of CapEx and OpEx investments in resilient retrofits. Prior to starting RiskFootprint, Albert was a nationally recognized environmental lawyer and a law professor, and was the recipient of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Defender of the Everglades Award. So an amazing panel. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with them. So we're going to start off with each of our panelists answering a question. When you hear the phrase resilient building, what is one thing you wish business leaders understood that they most often miss? And so I'll start. Emma, can I start with you?
Should I take it?
Yes, share one microphone.
Sure. So I think commonly you try to compare a resilient building to a decarbonized building, and carbon emissions is a single metric. Resilience is different because it's super location specific and it really relies on the context of the surrounding communities. So a resilient office building in Miami Beach is going to have different characteristics than a resilient office building in Atlanta, Georgia, for example. Additionally, I think that parallel between building, or that connection between building resilience and community resilience, is often overlooked. You can have the most highly resilient building in Miami Beach, but if all the surrounding infrastructure is destroyed, it doesn't really matter because people aren't going to be able to live or play or work there. And then the last thing, I think building owners sometimes imagine resilient strategies as these super capital intensive interventions. In reality, some of the basic things that you can do to safeguard human health, like regular building maintenance, establishing emergency protocols and procedures, are really low and no cost and can have tangible outcomes in the event of a climate event or other.
Yeah, so I'm going to give some facts about small businesses. So based off of FEMA, 90% of businesses that don't resume operation 5 days after a natural disaster don't open back up. And that actually turns into only a third of small businesses make it after a natural disaster after 1 year, which, all that to be said, is when we're designing buildings, the building code should be really just the minimum that we're all looking at. And when businesses are looking at building their own projects, they really need to look at designing for continuity of operations. And that way, not only can they provide continuous operation through a storm, but also hopefully serve the community as a space to help others as well.
In my opinion, resilience is nearly equivalent to asset management. If you would like to invest in a property and stay in that property for an extended period of time, you will be hit with some natural hazard and you need to protect yourself against that natural hazard. Therefore, changing your design philosophies to ensure that you have resilient design allows you that continuity of operations following that major hazard. Because when you have a resilient building, you're able to recover faster and then get back to where you were previously. Whereas other buildings that may be more vulnerable, they never return to where they were previously. So you never have that level of capacity in your business that you were able to have before. And then that is just a lack of continuity in your business. So I always say to our stubborn people that you're not investing in sustainable design, as people always like to put sustainability in a box and VE it out. We're really investing in your business and being able to profit off of the work you're doing.
Thank you. I agree with everything that was said, but if there's one thing that I would have leaders at the COO C-suite level focus on, is that in the United States every year commercial real estate spends about $60 billion on end of life replacement, retrofit, a roof wears out, a boiler, elevators need repair. So every year there's $60 billion of work that's done on commercial buildings. every dollar spent is a decision point. Are you going to replace in like kind, because you can under the code with an older building, your 90-mile-an-hour roof that you put on in Miami Beach 20, 30 years ago needs to be replaced? Are you going to replace it with a 90-mile-an-hour roof? Or are you going to replace it with a 150-mile-an-hour roof because you're in the hurricane storm surge zone and the wind zone, and make it white so it's going to reflect heat and save you energy? That's the decision point. And my, I guess, biggest concern is that the owners and investors in these big buildings that we see around us simply aren't thinking about safety and resilient upgrade to resilience when these normal end of useful life decisions arise. And that's a change in mindset that really needs to happen.
Yeah, thank you. Fantastic answers. One of the things I kind of heard is that when we're thinking about resilience and businesses or organizations think about this, they need to not only think about their bottom line and their return on investment, but also about their employees, the community who depends upon them, others. So it goes out in terms of a long-term element of community resilience and community sustainability, as well as a particular business continuity in a more narrow sense. So thank you for those insights. And I hope I summed up a little bit of that. I'm going to target a few questions to specific panelists, but then invite the other panelists to weigh in as a follow-up on the answers. I'm going to start with you, Emma. Many organizations now understand climate risk conceptually, but struggle to translate that into action. What's the most important first step an organization can take to move from climate risk awareness to meaningful resilience planning?
Sure, great question. So a lot of the work that we do at Retech Advisors is helping investment managers, private equity corporates, basically companies that own, operate, invest in real estate, move from that planning understanding to actually pulling the trigger to take action. It's really common today, especially among commercial real estate investment portfolios, to have an understanding of where there are pockets of risk across, especially these diversified portfolios that are distributed not just geographically, but in the types of assets that they contain. You can get a very reasonable assessment of that risk, and I would call a lot of the entry level assessments to be more qualitative. So think red, yellow, green traffic light of for a specific address, what is the risk categorization there? There are more sophisticated climate risk analytic providers that also move toward the quantification of physical risk in financial terms. And I think that is one of the first steps. But once you've completed that sort of corporate facility level or portfolio level assessment of risk, really the most important first step is prioritization. And I would say hand in hand with that prioritization needs to be proactive and intentional communication. So when I talk about prioritization, it's first, what are the 1, 2, 3 most critical risks to your company operations or your portfolio? And considering, again, things like geography, the number of tenants or employees at a given facility, use type, and the downtime or the impact to revenue in the event of a major storm, helping to both categorize those risks, understand which are most important, and then identify the suite of, we'll call them mitigation strategies that you can implement to reduce exposure to those risks is really an important step. When you think about prioritizing the specific mitigation strategies, I typically advise sort of a framework approach that considers the cost, the difficulty of implementation. Retrofitting an entire building mechanical system is much more expensive and disruptive to tenants than changing the exterior landscaping to improve the percolation of water on site. So I'll just acknowledge that there's different factors that can help you get sharper in how you prioritize not just which risks that we want to address, but also how we want to address them. And I think something that's understated in a lot of these interventions are the co-benefits. that you can realize, not just to improve the ability to adapt after a hurricane hits, but you can reduce operating costs. You can avoid penalties from building performance standards. You can ideally protect and improve human health and safety. There are so many co-benefits that come along with making these interventions that having that holistic picture gives you a better platform to prioritize. And then to inform this prioritization exercise, I think communication, proactive communication to targeted stakeholders is paramount. A lot of my clients are super motivated by insurance payments. They've seen insurance as a percentage of their net operating income double in the past 5 to 10 years. So they really want to understand, reach out to insurers and ask, what are you looking for to evidence a really effective climate physical risk management program? What is the documentation that I need to put in place to make that happen? A recent study, Aon is a insurance broker, among other things, and they noted that 65% of the insurance underwriters that they surveyed will take things like an engineering study as documentation and be able to use that to say, this company, this portfolio is more intelligently managing risk, and that can unlock conversations where maybe you have coverage where you weren't able to access it before, or maybe you have reduced premiums, better rates. All of those things I would bucket under helping to paint the return on the resilience investment. So that proactive engagement of insurers is absolutely critical with that information, as well as the categorization of energy emission savings, improved fill in the blank. You can go to senior leadership, ask them what their strategic priorities and plans are, and help frame the recommendations that you're making in a way that's going to resonate with them. The other group, I think from a more corporate perspective, of course, to engage is suppliers, asking them how they are effectively managing their physical risk, because that will help you pinpoint weak spots, establish contingency plans, and ultimately build a more robust supply pipeline that can avoid this instance where your business is completely offline as a result of a specific acute event. So that combination of prioritization and quantification of the co-benefits, ideally in financial terms, with input and buy-in from senior leadership, makes it a lot easier to prioritize, and that capital allocation just gets a little less clunky.
Great. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Thoughts? Okay. Well, so I think there was so much that Emma shared that was brilliant. I want to emphasize two things that I heard in there. One is about prioritization, and thinking back to Albert's thing in the opening round about decision points. And so all that prioritization is about, there are many things we could do, which are the most important, and let's have a plan in place and work on them systematically. And the other is thinking about the co-benefits. And I think that was such an important point, Emma, that it's not just about let's protect ourselves from a hurricane or a wildfire or something else like that. There are things that help the people in the building, reduce your utility costs, other things like that. So thank you. So next, I want to target a question to you, Amanda. For years, we focused on making buildings more efficient. Today, we're talking about resilience, adaptation, and regenerative design. How do you see the architect's role evolving beyond sustainability toward creating buildings and communities that can thrive under changing conditions?
So when everybody thinks about an architect, they usually just think of, well, they did a pretty building or they did a pretty ugly building. We don't get thought about all the different kind of subcategories that we have to kind of cover and touch as we're working on our projects. And we're at a unique intersection where we're working or discussing climate change or climate science, engineering, policy making, education, business strategy, and finance even. And I really think that we are in the conversation usually with business owners when it's in regards to building performance, not only from day one, but 20, 30 years down the line. So when we talk about sustainability, resilience, and regenerative design, they're kind of threefolds. So sustainability is really an additive approach where you're looking at how you can add singular items to build a more sustainable project. right? I put solar panels on, but then, as Kendall mentioned, they can get VE'd off. So how do I integrate them earlier? Whereas resilience, they're interdependent on each other. If I have a weak link in my system, we're not resilient, right? I had a project where one of my, where the owner said, well, can I put hurricane doors only on the front door and nowhere else? And we said, that's not how it works. Just because your front door is covered does not mean your back door is covered. Um, and, we had this whole conversation and had to show them. And unfortunately, they ended up going through two massive hurricanes and they learned their lesson very fast. And then, sure enough, the rest of the project got fully integrated with the resilient design. We actually ended up hardening their structure even more than they had planned, as well as integrating some of that hurricane-proof readiness. But so then regenerative design is actually a living systems approach where everything is helping each other out and really growing. So when we think of it, we think of a human body or a flower where everything's working together simultaneously and hopefully giving a um, um, positive reaction back to the community, whether it's clean water or carbon sequestration. Um, so I really do think that when we start looking at communities in regards to architecture and the business practice, we then start looking at how can our projects really start bringing in those communities, as I mentioned earlier, to be able to support them, whether it's if there's, we're getting heat advisories every day, whether it's a space in there just for communities to come in and the public to come in to cool down and have water, versus we were at AI Florida, we went to the legislators and talked to them about how can we incorporate hardening gymnasiums at schools to in smaller communities to be able to help them create a space that for people who can't leave during hurricanes, how do we protect them? So it's really seeing how we can invest earlier and bringing in some of these ideas while we can work on it after the fact. It's a lot harder, right? It costs a lot more money. It closes operations, and we really have to look at phasing. So really looking at it from that perspective of implementing this in earlier, but then also as architects, we have the unique situation that we work with a lot of different people, and talking to policymakers is really important because we have kind of our boots on the ground, eyes with everybody and talking to our community and really making sure that, not one project can make a difference, but really changing policy can make the change for not only a community, but a city and a state, and really ensuring that we can kind of grow into supporting our neighborhoods around us. So,
Can you expand? You said sometimes these strategies get VE'd out. Can you talk a little bit more about value engineering and how important that is when you're, as an architect, making decisions and talking to these owners?
okay, yeah. So VE is really the process that we go through in our industry where we design this beautiful, amazing building, high performance, and we end up going through and getting priced. So everything that gets put into the building gets reviewed, and most of the time we come out over budget. And usually, what happens is the contractor then goes through and starts reviewing what can be taken out. What are simple things that I can change that might not affect the look or feel of the building? And one of our main goals as architects is really making sure that not only is our design kept, but also the performance levels that we have set for ourselves and the project is kept on. So making sure that when a project has to get reviewed and value engineered, we can then promote what we're really pushing and really creating spaces to allow for us to kind of compromise and say, well, I really don't think you should remove that because we need that. And it will end up helping you in the long run, whether the ROI is in 5 years or 10 years. Really wait to see how that can then help your project and your building performance as well as your business performance continue through the process.
I am frequently in a position where my sustainable design strategies are at risk of being removed from the project. And it's heartbreaking because, I love a good green wall. That's always the first one to go, unfortunately, especially because it has continued maintenance and all of that. So there's so many elements of sustainable design where those who aren't enthusiastic about sustainability will say, oh, well, why do we need this? There's no quantifiable need for it. And that's where we get into return on investment and we make those calculations to say, no, this will help you in the long run. And this is a worthwhile investment. So unfortunately, we have to put up that fight very often. And as sustainable design specialists, I specifically find myself in that position more often than I'd like to be. So we just have to be empowered and be willing to fight the good fight.
And really quickly, and we'll move on to the next question. But speaking on that, I think there are also the understanding that ROI doesn't always have to be number driven. We do a lot of research when it comes to what buildings create emotions when you're coming into the space. So really taking in consideration who's coming and using the space. Usually more people rather come to a space with a green wall and being welcomed in that format rather than just a blank wall or just, something that's very white and neutral. So I do think there are elements that might not be financially given the return back, but the users and the visitors that might be coming to the space really do feel it, and they will choose to come back to one of those spaces that's more welcoming and you can feel it rather than just something that might be more efficient in the beginning of the opening.
Thank you. And one of the things I was going to add, thank you for the explanation of value engineering. One of the things that I've often said, I didn't come up with this, but I love this phrase, value engineering rarely adds value and often doesn't involve engineering. So there's some short-term thinking there. So one of the key things I heard Amanda share was that these elements, relative resilience and regenerative design, need to start early in the process to be considered, but need to be thinking long-term. And while it's easier to think about that long-term thinking in terms of a institutional or government type entity as opposed to commercial real estate, one of the key things that I like to point out, and I think that both you, Emma, and Amanda have touched on this, is that even if it's a shorter term thing, that property turns over and the next person who owns it might care a lot about those issues, and it's hard to retrofit them in at that point. So you can end up with stranded assets if you have not incorporated resilience into that piece. So I love that we got into this thing about discussion about cost, because that was about the basis of the question about to pitch to you, Kendall. Many resilient strategies sound expensive until you compare them to the cost of disruption. What are some examples of practical design or material decisions that deliver resilience benefits without dramatically increasing project costs?
Thanks, Alan. I'm going to use a wonderful case study, the Luminary Hotel, as our example. The Luminary Hotel is located in Fort Myers. It is one of our pride and joy projects because it is truly exemplary in the resilient design strategies, and that was demonstrated in the 2022 Hurricane Ian. Fort Myers was obliterated in that hurricane, and luckily the Luminary was able to serve as a emergency operations point for all of the first responders and Governor DeSantis to be able to facilitate all of the emergency operations taking place to help everyone. And that was because we had these resilient design strategies in place so that we were able to not lose power, one, and continue operations. While I was discussing this with the architectural team who worked on the project in preparation for this, they said a hotel is no good if there's no power and if there's broken glass. So getting to those individual strategies, right? The first floor is 9 feet above ground level. So when you have a plinth that allows you to prevent those floodwaters from actually getting into the building. And then therefore, you're able to have all of your systems stay online. Additionally, we had a backup power generator that lasted 15 days. So that was facilitating not only hotel operations, but also all of the emergency operations necessary for that hotel. And we also talk about projectiles when it comes to resilience, and you need to have that projectile resistant glass because when any high winds come towards your building, you have no idea what type of projectiles may hit your building. So that's super important to have. And I'll end by saying the only thing that happened to our building was that the U in luminary fell off, and they ended up actually using that as a kind of monument on the inside of the lobby. They had it set up with all of these photos of all of the exciting things that happened during that time. And in addition to the fact that it was a great story for us to tell at HOK, it also facilitated the fact that they were able to serve the community. So there was a greater impact there that we're so proud of. And I encourage you all to look up the Luminary because there are plenty of news stories about that. And I hope that in the future we can continue to give back in that context.
I love that story, Kendall, and that aspect of that there's a business case for it in terms of maintaining operations, but there's also a community stewardship and community connection element that are brought together with the same type of strategies. So thinking about those long term, and also then having some fun to show the success of that measure. So continuing a little bit with the cost, but then but expanding out in terms of communication of how you communicate those things. I want to give Albert a chance to weigh in here. Many executives still view resilience as a cost rather than a business strategy. What arguments or metrics are most effective in helping leadership see resilience as they deliver long-term value? And I think that value piece is the thing I'll emphasize.
Thanks, Alan. You know, I wish I could say that there was one strategy that is right now in this particular time working with. We mostly work with commercial real estate that gets the C-suite to make decisions. There's a lot of fence sitting, truthfully, and cost is huge. I mean, since COVID and work at home, even though we have this, rise in the stock market, even though data centers are being built all over the place, commercial real estate is not doing that well. There's still a lot of half-empty office buildings around. So the idea of spending money on making a building more sustainable, more safer, more resilient is difficult. We're in difficult times right now. Last year was a very peaceful hurricane year, and this year with El Nino, it may be as well. But I always take the position. It's not quite answering your question because I don't know that there is one answer. But in 2018, when Hurricane Irma came ashore down Brickell Avenue, it was a Category 1. And for 4 days, there was a river of water right out here running down the Brickell Avenue in the financial center. But because it was a Cat 1, the water really didn't get too much inside the lobbies. It got underground. There was elevator damage. There was millions of dollars of damage, not billions of dollars worth of damage here in Miami. Had Irma been a Cat 3 instead of a Cat 1, these buildings architecturally would be very different today than they are, because the lobbies would be higher. We probably would not still be allowing underground parking here in Miami Beach. So what is going to change the decisions, the mindset? unfortunately, probably another big one that's going to come through. Most of my clients and we talked a little bit about the ASTM property resilience assessment. Most of my clients, the top tier, are owners of buildings that have been hit. And then either the owners or the condo owners, basically say, no mas, we're going to spend the money and we're going to make it better. But if the building has, dodged the bullet there and we're in tough economic times, it's harder to get the decisions made.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that, or? So I think I think we're nearing the end of our time, but we've got a little bit of time to delve into this question and maybe some other ones that come out of it. But I wanted to ask each of our panelists to think about the fact that many organizations say they're committed to resilience, but want to think about what's one thing that you wish they one thing that you think they're still not taking seriously enough in the resilience conversation. So we'll kind of close with that, or maybe add some other questions at the end if we have time.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. I think instead of viewing resilience as this add-on, it's truly now, you've heard from all the panelists, a competitive advantage. You're going to preserve that value of the asset by taking these steps to mitigate your exposure. You're going to limit loss. And sorry, one more thing on value preservation, a lot of the clients that I work with, maybe they're only going to hold an asset for 5 to 10 years. Despite that, now the conversation becomes, what is the next buyer going to expect? Are they not going to want to purchase this property because they've seen the catastrophic losses that it suffered in the last major storm? Kendall spoke about the Luminary Hotel, which I need to look up, but it evidences resilience as a strategy to really limit loss and liability in future events. And then I also spoke to navigating that really dynamic insurance market. Underwriters can only price what they can see. So the more you can do to evidence, these are the investments that we made, these are the studies that we've conducted, and here's how we know we'll be better prepared next time, is a huge advantage. And it's good for HOK to be able to say, oh, we designed that building, or the building owner to say, yes, we paid for this resilience investments. And then I think the last thing that drives a lot of the clients that I work with now is reporting. And investors, especially European investors, are asking not just, have you quantified or have you understood physical risk exposure? They want to know what you're doing to actually reduce that exposure, and being able to say, yes, here's our program, here's our process, here's some case studies, I think goes a long way in capital raising.
Yeah, I think back to what I was saying before, just incorporating it in the design early, and don't underestimate that. If you are working on a project and you are looking at either a renovation or a new build, just starting to look at not only the shocks and stressors that are going to come to that project, but then looking forward and seeing how we can even help our projects and help our community even further, whether it's through creating community spaces or looking at the health of the location, the financial situation that everybody's in, and how we can spark different conversations in regards to just elevating everybody as a whole. I think it was brought up in prior situations that prior session, that we do not talk to our neighbors very much anymore. And I think it is really, in fact, the infrastructure that we give, not only as a person, but also as our projects and buildings, need to communicate more. And that way we can work holistically to protect ourselves, rather than individually trying to find ourselves elevating one and not everyone else.
I have 3 hot topics that you can write down for your notes if you want to further advocate for building resilience. The first is asset management, of course. Next, continuity of operations. And lastly, risk mitigation. These are our key talking points when we're speaking to people, especially those who are not excited about resilience and are hesitant to contribute to resilient design investments. We also like to consider the fact that a lot of the data that we use for our research is historical, and everything that's happened in the past is less extreme than what will happen in the future. So we all have to consider forward thinking and make assumptions that precipitation will be greater. Sea levels are rising, temperatures are rising. So all of those have to go into place, and wind speeds also rising. So we have to plan for the worst, unfortunately, because we have no idea what could possibly happen. And to Kylie's presentation earlier, a lot of the data that we previously had is now not accessible. So we have to find ways to navigate that and be able to make the case for resilient design. We use various words like durability and hardening, and really just try to frame it so that these business owners can absorb the information, because we are the leaders. And as we like to say at HOK, we're the champions. So we have to really push for their investment, but also for ourselves to protect our own firms as designers. We talk about standard of care. The standard of care is changing, and we now have to consider resilience. So we use programs like RiskFootprint, for example, or First Street. And when you identify those risks, it makes you liable for future hazards. So a lot of times when I send a resilience report, people get mad at me. They're like, why did you tell us this? Because now we have to do something about it. And it's just the case of the world right now. We do have to be cautious of things we've never seen before, and really try to take care of our great grandchildren, and really focus on what could potentially happen.
I just want to wrap up. I mentioned the ASTM International's Property Resilience Assessment Standard, and Alan has mentioned it. And you know, it's not familiar to most people. So I would take a look at it, use your AI or Google or whatever, and ask it how it can help you, because it is a very well crafted and well documented and disciplined process to get to resilience.
I'd like to make a plug for Lead version 5 because Ryan Snow's in the audience. Lead version 5 has a Lead version 5 has a strong emphasis on resilience, and our leadership director of sustainable design, Annika Landrino, has said, if you want to be future thinking and forward thinking, this is the direction that the industry is going. And we were just discussing the fact that so many people are hesitant to adopt Lead version 5 because of the new requirements, but this is what we need right now. And you can take a look at some of the resilience related credits in Lead version 5 for some standardization of how to proceed, so that you have some structure to rely on.
I guess it's not. Okay, great. Now it's working. Thank you all. Fantastic. One of the things I think I'll just leave as a final point is this idea of resilience is also about interdependence, and whether we're a public entity or a private real estate or thinking about infrastructure, we're not creating bunkers. We're thinking about how do we all work together and integrate these resilience strategies in with other public and private benefits, both business benefits as well as community benefits. And so it all goes into a system interconnection. So let's give a big hand for the brilliance of our panel. Wonderful talk. And thank you very much.